You're listening to The Valley Current.
So I wanted to play that even though it went a little longer than what I remembered it going, because when I started my journey a couple of years ago, yoga, swimming, biking, consistently, every day, including this morning, even though my lecture notes were not organized and I had my lovely wife help me pull stuff out of the cloud account, I was doing exactly this testing. And by the end of the 2 years, even though I'm currently 67, the real age data, the tracker data, says I'm now 55. So I'm a big believer in exercise. I think Wally's a big believer in exercise, even more than diet. I'm also a big believer in diet. You got the fact that the suggestion is maybe one meal a day with a lot of fasting. For a lot of people, that's a tough nut to crack. I come from a family that was a food family, grocery store. There was always an abundance of food. We would eat whatever was getting too old to sell. So, I mean, there was never waste. In fact, that was a big lesson for me to learn with a younger wife who doesn't eat anything near what I eat. She says, you could leave stuff on the plate. You don't have to finish it. You don't have to feel like you're committing a crime by putting something back in the fridge or even throwing it away. And that was a big lesson, so thank you for doing that. So I'm a big believer that much more of what we will do is counseling people along these lines. So having watched that video, what's your reaction to it, Leonard? Because do you think it's hogwash? You know, Sinclair is way out there. And so I want to get your reaction, because you both are living into your 90s and you both have a pretty good shot of getting to 100. But I don't think either of you wants to believe that you're going to take a pill that's going to somehow reverse aging, right?
Well, first of all, you have to tell me whether this microphone is on when it's red or when it's green.
I think green is on, right? Green. Press the button and turn it to green. Now it's on.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, that's it. You're on. Yep.
Well, in answer to your question, I hate to be the skunk at your garden party.
No, I want you to be that. I want you to be that. This is called devil's advocacy.
This is the biggest load of nonsense I have heard, although it is not unique in that respect. I don't know where to start, frankly. Let's start with the difference between aging and longevity determination, which is about which Sinclair is ignorant. Aging is a catabolic process. That is, it's a process in which systems become inactive, but they lose function, they deteriorate, there is malfunction, dysfunction, and non-replacement of essential molecules. Anabolic properties are those of longevity determination. All of the biological processes that we possess are the determinants of our longevity, over which we have very little control. But longevity has been known for over 150 years to be controllable. There are animals of the same species, for example, that live longer in the cold waters in which that same species lives, as opposed to the shortened life expectancy of the same species in warm waters. These discoveries have been made since the mid-19th century, especially in the laboratories of German scientists. So manipulating the longevity process is known. We can do it by changing temperature, by crowding, and by diet, and by several other processes. I won't bore you with all the details. So David has no concept of the difference between aging and longevity determination are two completely separate and opposing processes.
Well, he's lumping them together because he's thinking that you can extend longevity by playing with the slowness of aging, or he goes so far as to suggest reversing of aging, like an actual reversal.
He has provided no information, as have virtually every other person in this field, for to distinguish the biomarkers of aging as opposed to the biomarkers of longevity. There is no agreement in this field internationally on what constitutes good biomarkers for biological aging as opposed to passage of time itself. We have no such markers. So to argue that you can extend someone's life expectancy by intervening with the longevity aspect is possible. You just do the obvious things. You don't smoke, you don't stand in front of running buses, and you don't use all of the things that we have been taught are healthy things, and I won't list those. But I should point out that there is no institution in this country or on this planet who responds to what all of us in this room would agree is true. And that truth is that the greatest risk factor for the leading causes of death is aging. Yet, there is no institution in this country, including the National Institute on Aging, of which I was a founding member of its council, that promotes, to say nothing about funding, research into the etiology of the greatest risk factor for the leading causes of death. And that's a scandal in my view. And I challenge anyone to point out anywhere, any institution in this country, including Stanford, of course, that has focused attention on funding research on the etiology of biological aging. There's one other important point before I stop, before I get off my soapbox, and that is aging is a phenomenon unique to humans and the animals we choose to protect, pets, zoo animals, domestic animals. It does not occur in feral or wild animals because they lose their lives shortly after reproductive maturation, either as a result of accident, predation, or disease. So aging is a phenomenon that has been created by humans because we have learned, if that's the correct word, how to deal with our predators and with our disease and with our accidents so as to live longer than the period of time necessary to reproduce the species, which is about 35 years.
So we're already living too long.
We're already living too, exactly. We have revealed teleologically, we have revealed a process that was never intended for us to see. And you can determine whether that's good or bad.
Well, the planet is getting more crowded, right? You could argue.
Crowding has nothing to do with age, with the process of aging.
Well, but more people are on the planet for a longer period of time, right?
Well, that depends on the definition of terms. The human lifespan has not increased. What has increased is human life expectation, which is a completely different phenomenon. So in that sense, expectancy has increased. The span has not. There's no evidence that the span of, let's say, 125 years has increased. The evidence is that life expectancy in this country and most developed countries has increased from about 49 years in the year 1900 to today, which is about 80 years. And the argument that that can increase is nonsense. The events that allowed us to have a life expectancy that increased that amount of time from 1900 to today can only happen once. It can never happen again. You can never cure causes of death from tuberculosis, which is the leading cause of death in the middle of the 20th century. You cannot have that happen twice. That's the logic. In fact, and this has been done, I've done it, several other people have done it. If you resolve by mathematics, it's very easy, it's high school math. If you decide to reduce the causes, to eliminate the causes of death currently written on death certificates by arguing that deaths from cancer have been resolved, and so the people who are now surviving from that cause, what was that previous cause, are now you distribute the remaining causes of death within that group. What you discover is that human life expectancy based on current death certificates, now that's a crucial phrase, and I won't go into the details of that. Life expectancy in this country or in any developed country cannot be greater than an average of 92 years. It's impossible.
So it doesn't go up by much?
Correct. Well, 12 years, let's say, which depends on your values, whether it's much or not.
You're saying if you take off the table what are now the three big killers, cancer, coronary disease, and what's the third one? And there a third one that's among the three big?
Cardiovascular disease and stroke.
And stroke. You take those off the table, the averages go up.
And everything else that's on a death
Everything else,
certificate.
okay. All right. Wally, what do you think?
Well, I'm first privileged to be part of you all being.
We're privileged to have you, very much.
I'm a traditional physician, and my father was president of the AMA. I grew up as a little doctor's son. I knew medicine was going to be in my umbilical blood. And so I've lived a very traditional medical life. I've been at the Palo Alto Clinic and here at Stanford for my whole career. But not until this lifestyle medicine thing came have I been plumbing the real depth. Because as Leonard has been a fervent champion of the idea that most of what medicine is after is not longevity. It has to do with treating disease, and aging is not a disease.
Well, that Sinclair says the opposite. Sinclair wants to say it's a disease, right?
Excuse me, I can give you 5 reasons why it's not a disease if you want to hear them.
Okay.
There is no disease that affects every living animal.
Oh, across the board.
Second,
It's a law of physics that's applying.
there is no disease that only begins after reproductive success. Third, there is no disease that is not revealed in feral animals that then becomes revealed in all of those animals when they're put into zoos or kept as pets, etc. There is no disease that becomes revealed only after an animal is removed from its feral circumstances. I'm trying to recall the other 2 or 3 that are described in several of my papers, which reminds me of an interesting observation that opposes what I said earlier, and that is that there are 3 early signs of old age. The first is the loss of short-term memory, and I don't remember the other 2.
But Wally, you want to finish your thought? I'm sorry I cut you off. Want to finish your thought?
Oh, I very fervently an idea that medicine is ruled by data, and I think now we're into the new age of having science behind it. Until this generation, we've not known what the human potential Now we know what the human potential is, and we can shape it. I've run 45 marathons, and I'm suffering because of the damage that it brought to me. But I'm still alive at 92, and I'm planning to live with Leonard, my dear friend, to be 100. I think 100 is a logical solution.
So you think magically the actual number that all of the folks in this room should strive for is a healthy 100 years?
100 healthy years.
And like do what needs to be done that's controllable to get there.
Change what you can, accept what you must, and know the difference.
So if you had to change anything that you did in the course of your life, would you just run less? Because what you're saying is you actually ended up running too much.
I ran too much.
Like you overextended yourself.
Over committed.
Now, Leonard, you're 93?
Sorry, I'm 94 in May.
94 in May, and your mom made it to 106. Am I remembering this right?
Yes.
So you've got good genes working for you.
Well, if you believe that genes play a role in longevity, yes, but that's debatable.
But what do you run? Do you exercise? What do you do?
I do not run. I lead pretty much a sedentary life, although I have to run a house, a big house. I do all of the cleaning and maintenance of that house. I cook all of my meals, and I have no problems with my ADLs, activities of daily living. What can I attribute it to? The best answer is luck.
Just lucky.
Yeah.
As in?
Because to the best of my knowledge and that of Wally's, we believe pretty strongly that the cause of aging is the increasing entropy as a result of the second law of thermodynamics. You cannot interfere with the law of physics. The energy that was built up during the formation of our bodies becomes dissipated after the period of reproductive success and in some cases raising progeny to independence. But that inevitable law is pretty much a random process, but with an end that is a certainty.
So there's not...
I can't attribute anything to my longevity other than to stay away from the obvious things that we all know of that will interfere with our health. And that's a completely different process than aging.
So I want to end by taking some questions and then sharing some of this data, because you all were kind enough to provide a little survey in advance, which is the questions were, what lifespan, all caps, lifespan as in your full life, do you expect to have? And you'll see just 13% thought over 100. So it's a small number, and these are all folks that are medically driven. A third thought 90 to 100, 40% thought 80 to 90. So literally, if you count the 70 to 80, more than half of the group thought you're lucky if you get it to 90. You may be lucky if you get to 80. Basically, most people thought if you got to over 90, you're really way ahead of others. So then the second question was what health span, which obviously some people were suggesting over 100, but most people were like, God, if you get to anything north of 80, 90 years, you're doing really well, which is quite a statement, because I think years ago you wouldn't say that. Most people would be like, your health span is going to start faltering. Both of you have been lucky enough to still have your health by and large, right? because you're both running your own households. You're both taking care of yourself. You're not in the hospital. You're not in hospice. You're not like my brother. You're not like my mom, calling up 911 on a weekly basis to get hauled over to the hospital to have whatever checks get done. So the third question is what work span, which gets interesting because I had historically seen these numbers shrink, but it actually looks like most people expect to work for a fairly lengthy period of time. Of course, they're living longer too. And then what is your current age? Most people are under mid-30s. In fact, some are still in their 18 to 24. How many hours per week? This seems high too, 40 to 50, in some cases 50 to 60 hours. What gross income do you expect to make? Those numbers were interesting as well. And then given anticipated work span, health span, and lifespan, and those are related because in fact they play into how you choose to either retire or not retire and what kind of money. But most people thought, if you add these numbers up, thought if you had some number under $5 million socked away, you'd be set for life. I don't know that we think that way. Like, most people don't go back. I remember when my dad retired and I said, how much money, Dad, did you need to retire? He said something like, I didn't think I needed that much money because I got a Social Security check. And I said, really, a Social Security check? He said, we don't spend a lot of money. We paid for our house. We're done. Like, basically, it wasn't about the amount of money. It was about the amount of expense. It was much more about, at what level are you living as a standard versus how much money have you socked away? He looked at it like, besides the food and the electric bill, it's not much. So anyway, those are the remarks. We'll take some questions. We have both people online as well as people in the audience. If the online people want to text something, they can do that. Any questions from the audience? Because we are going to sing happy birthday to you, Wally, for your birthday that's coming up. But we have some really interesting people here. So any questions at all or online? The online thing's still on, Ben? It's still on? So if people want to send a text message, they can. And I'll read the question anonymously if you'd like. I don't know if the text messages come through here for folks. I see there's a few chat items.
There was, yeah.
Is there questions on there?
Up.
Should I go up and go down?
Yeah, right here.
Would the planet be able to handle everyone living much longer? That's an interesting question because the planet continues to grow population, right? Right? We're probably headed towards 10 billion people soon enough.
We're only at about 8 at the moment. That's big enough.
And the planet is suffering indirectly, right? You would say?
Of course.
And at some point you would say, what is the level of sustainability? Like, I know in Silicon Valley when I first came here some 40-something years ago, because I originated from New York City, came to law school on the West Coast at UCLA, and then made my way up here with the firm that we actually started Apple Computer. Jobs and Wozniak walked in as two basically, broke kids, one a high school, one a sort of a college dropout, the other sort of a smart engineering guy. And, we didn't realize what they had. We had a chance to actually invest in Apple Computer, and like idiots, we didn't do it. That's a separate story. But conceptually, the Valley was a bunch of orange trees. And there wasn't the kind of congestion on 101 or 280 pre-pandemic. Now, during the pandemic, the congestion subsided. But generally speaking, the density of the Valley has just exploded. And probably that will continue. Stanford keeps building. There's a lot more residences that are going up. So is there anything else on there? Oh, around resistance training like weights versus cardiovascular exercise and its impact on longevity. Well, people know there's been a recent study that says even for 3 minutes, if you lift a set of weights for 3 minutes, you get something like a 15% increase in your strength, in your arm strength, which was kind of an amazing statement because it's suggesting it doesn't take a lot of movement to actually cause some additional, but you don't lift weights, right, Len? You don't do that kind of exercise.
I avoid lifting anything at all.
But you stay fit, right, generally?
Well, I have to climb stairs a couple of times a day, and I described previously what I have to do to maintain a household. which is not planned exercise.
But just climbing the stairs to get up to your office or bedroom may be enough for you.
Well, I don't know that exercise physiologists would agree with that, but I would like to believe that there's some truth to it.
What do you think, Wally? What do you think about this idea of resistance training and the like?
I think they're both important. I think we need to lift weights and we need to exercise. And how much is still open to. I don't think you can use Leonard and me as examples of anything.
What I discovered, just my last personal remark about my journey, is I discovered that at the much larger weight that I carried 2 years ago, it was nearly impossible to get in and out of a hot bathtub or even a cold bathtub for that matter. But after the weight loss, after the yoga, after the strength training, it was like so easy to get in and out of a bathtub and so easy to get in and out of a kayak and so easy to get in and off of a bike. So for my money, if I had to say the one change I'd recommend to everyone is make sure you spend an hour a day sweating, whether it's yoga, biking, swimming, all three. I think that cycle does just an immense number of things for you. Yes, sir.
You know, there was a recent study that looked at strength training versus aerobic training, at least in terms of sleep quality. And they found that those who took up strength training slept 40 minutes longer versus those who did aerobic training, they improved about the same as controls.
So I should make one last plug, and I don't have any stock in this company, but I started to wear this Oura ring, O-U-R-A. People probably know it captures a lot of real-time data, including sleep data, and it puts it to your smartphone. So you then get just two numbers, which is how well did your sleep go in a previous night, and what kind of exercise number did you achieve based on the movement that it detects on a scale from 0 to 100. If you watch that data, you actually start paying attention to what you're doing and what you might do differently. And it starts to make you realize that you are affecting daily what your eventual health span will be over the long term based on how you use your time. And how you use your time badly, sort of like pulling an all-nighter, has its price the next day, and the day after. So with that, I think we should all sing happy birthday to you because we have a cake here. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Wally. Happy birthday to you. And many, many more, Wally. Many, many more. Yeah, Wally's got to blow out a candle. Of course he's got to blow out at least one. This is your 92nd birthday. You got to get to 100. You're all invited to his 100.
92 candles.
You're not going to blow out 92, but you're going to blow out at least 2.
As my grandfather would say, he's still in the young 90s.
You're in the young 90s. That's a good place to be. And we've got plates for cake for those of you.
Go, Wally.
Of course, it's sugar, so probably not the best.
1, 2, 3.
All right. Hey. So thank you all for coming. It's been a delight to be here.
Thank you. Carry the torch.
Carry the torch.
Stanford.
Yes, you
From
will.
being a disease center to a health center.
Dr. Bortz is really the founder of lifestyle medicine. He was really the impetus for why I started this course years ago. Very fortunate to meet him.
I've been very fortunate to be your friend for so long, and thank you for inviting me
It
in.
ain't over yet, Jack.
It ain't over yet. It ain't going to be over yet. It's good. It's beautiful. Yes, let's cut the cake. Let's cut the cake and bring it to the folks so they all have it. We have a lot of cake here. They could take some of it home. Thank you, Gerd, for coming. Interesting, huh? Interesting stuff, right?
We're making progress.
Well, without you, well, it wouldn't be happening.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.